So as Jeff said, my name is Stacy Pursell, and I know many of you in this room, but for those who don't know me, I have worked as an executive search consultant and recruiter in both the animal health industry and the veterinarian profession for the past 21 years. And I'll tell you a little bit about my story and how I got into the profession, because I get asked frequently, how did you become a veterinary recruiter? Well, 21 years ago, I started out doing executive search and recruiting for Fortune 500 companies. And the area that I focused on were consumer packaged goods companies. And many of my clients were food and beverage companies. And a number of the human food companies had pet food divisions. So I primarily focused on placing sales and marketing executives. And one of my clients that had a pet food division asked me to find an executive that was a veterinarian. So I filled that position, and when I was working on that search, I looked around the country and I could not find a single recruiting firm or a recruiter that specialized in the veterinary profession or in the animal health industry, so I decided to do it. Back in the 90s, when I would call veterinarians about job opportunities, they would ask me if I was working for the military or if I was an Army recruiter, because they would tell me at the time that they thought I was calling them trying to recruit them to join the Army, because they would say that those were the only calls from recruiters that they would get. And so I would say, well, do you know what a headhunter is? And I know some recruiters don't like that term, but I embrace it. I'm fine with it. And they would say, oh yeah, my spouse gets calls from headhunters, or my friend or my neighbor does, so I know what that is. So that's how I got into this space. Now, 21 years later, fast forward, many employers in both the animal health industry and in the veterinary profession are using recruiters to fill positions for them. So today, the topic of my presentation is hiring in the veterinary profession and why lack of speed kills. So you've probably heard the phrase that speed kills, usually in the reference of a fast-driving car. Now, I've got 4 teenagers in my house, 2 that are new drivers. One is 16, so she's got her permit and she's trying to get her driver's license. So I tell her not to drive too fast because speed kills. So that's how I came up with the topic of my presentation today. And there's probably been a public service announcement out there in the past about speed kills. Well, today I'm going to be talking about how the lack of speed kills, and specifically the topic is hiring in the veterinary profession. So what does a lack of speed kill specifically in this context? Well, it kills veterinary practices' chances for consistently hiring the top talent in the marketplace. So in recruiting, we have this phrase that we like to say, and it's that time kills all deals. And that's really the basis of my presentation today. So I've recruited in various economies. I've recruited in some really good economies, and I've recruited in some bad economies, and in various types of job markets. And I can say right now with 100% certainty that talent is scarce in the veterinary profession right now. And I have some statistics to back that up, but this is the current reality that we're dealing with, and probably many of you are experiencing this as well. So you've probably, I know a lot of you are practice management consultants, and your clients that are veterinary practices are just struggling to hire veterinarians and other talent right now. Okay, so there are 2 main aspects of this reality that employers must address. The first is why a lack of speed kills in today's marketplace, and 2, what can employers do to make adjustments so that they can consistently hire top talent and become an employer of choice in today's marketplace. Now, to understand how we got here, I'm going to talk about the current market conditions. So those of you know that the job market is somewhat governed by the economy, and there are basically 2 types of economies. There's a recessionary economy, and there's a recovery one. And all of us who've lived through the Great Recession, we know what a recessionary economy is like. And since the Great Recession ended, we're now in what we're calling a recovering economy. So in a recovering economy, these are some of the statistics, or some of the facts. Job openings are plentiful. Job seekers have more options that they can choose from. Employers are having more difficulty finding, identifying, and hiring candidates. Employers are having more difficulty keeping candidates engaged during the hiring process, and employers are having more difficulty closing and landing candidates in their positions. Now, there's also another rule that's important about a recovering economy, and that rule is this: the longer that a recovering economy lasts, the more likely it'll produce what we call a candidate's job market, and that's what we're experiencing right now, is a candidate's job market. Now, all of this leads to three main rules about a candidate's job market, and those are that all candidates have more employment options available to them right now. The best candidates have the most options, and the best candidates have the best options. Now, obviously, all employers, including veterinary employers, want to hire the best candidates, but since the best candidates have the best options and the most options, it's more difficult to hire them. And not only that, but the longer that this recovering economy lasts, the more of a candidate's job market that it will become. Now, another sign of a recovering economy is a growing stock market, which is called a bull market. And this is the opposite of a bear market, which describes a declining stock market, which is also in conjunction with a recessionary economy. So some of you may know that on March 9th of this year, our current bull market celebrated its ninth birthday, and this is the second longest bull market in this country since 1929. And this is important because since this bull market has lasted so long, it has resulted in a very strong candidate market. And the longer this continues, the scarcer top talent will become. So I want to share some statistics that back this up, and also to relay some of my own experiences as a recruiter with you. Last year, CNBC published an article, and the title was "For Aspiring Vets, Jobs Are Aplenty, Demand Set to Rise 18% in 10 Years." And the article referenced an interesting statistic, which is, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, opportunities for veterinarians are set to rise 18% through the year 2026. Now, for veterinary technicians, those needs are going to rise by 20% in the same time frame. So what exactly is the BLS saying here? Well, they're saying that this current bull market, it's the second longest since 1929. And so keep in mind the longest bull market in this country lasted from October 87 to March of 2000. So that's 13 years. So if the current bull market lasts another 4 years, then we're going to experience even more of a candidates market, and that hiring top talent in the veterinary profession will become even more difficult than it is right now. Now, much is made about the unemployment rate in the United States. In April of this year, the overall unemployment rate in the United States dropped to 3.9%, which is the lowest it's been in the past 17 years. Does anybody know what the unemployment rate is in the veterinary profession right now? It's 0.5%. So think about that. That's almost non-existent. So what that tells us is that almost everyone that's qualified to fill a job in this profession already has a job. So there's almost no one who's unemployed, statistically speaking. So I have another statistic that backs up such a low unemployment rate within the profession. At Western Veterinary Conference this year, I was attending an analytics session, and there was an economist there that said that there is currently one veterinarian for every jobs that are open in the United States. So that's a startling statistic, and since I work in the trenches of the employment marketplace, I'm fully aware that there is a lack of candidates for employers that are seeking to hire veterinarians. But one veterinarian for every 5 jobs, that's more of a lack. That is a serious shortage. So now I also want to relay some of my own experiences as a recruiter to fully illustrate all of this. As a recruiter, I'm on the front lines every day talking to employers, hiring managers, veterinary practice owners, and I know what's happening as it happens. And I even predicted this shortage during the Great Recession. During the Great Recession, I kept hearing people say that there were too many veterinarians, but I did not think that that was the case. So I have been talking to new graduate veterinarians. I've been talking to new graduate veterinarians and veterinarians with 2 years of experience. And some of these veterinarians are expecting between $100,000 and $130,000 in guaranteed compensation, and they're getting it. We recently had a veterinarian with 2 years of experience out of college, and he received 3 job offers in the range of $130,000 guarantee. We also had a brand new graduate who just graduated from college with no veterinary experience who said she was not going to take a job unless it was 120, and we presented her to some clients, got her interviews, and she got a job right out of school for $120,000 for her first job. So this is why lack of speed kills in the employment marketplace and in the veterinary profession. Employers need to move quickly during the hiring process, because if they don't, then they're at risk for losing top talent. Because remember, candidates have multiple options, and the best candidates have plenty of opportunities to choose from. So this means that it gets difficult to get top candidates to notice your position, and then it's even more difficult to get them to consider it. And it's even more difficult to get them to engage and to stay in the hiring process, and the degree of difficulty is higher at every stage in the process. But if employer moves too slowly, then they're at risk for the candidate taking an offer with another organization. And keep in mind that a candidate could also drop out of the hiring process and decide to stay with their current employer, because their current employer does not want to lose them. And right now, counter offers are very prevalent. We have candidates interviewing, and then they go to resign with their current employer, and then their current employer offers them more money or some incentive to try to keep them there. So in this job market, employers have to find, recruit, and hire quickly, because with a 0.5% unemployment rate and 5 openings for every 1 veterinarian, the margin for error is razor thin right now. So what adjustments can veterinary hospitals make in the process? Well, first of all, they should be proactive instead of reactive. They cannot just wait for candidates to come to them, because it's not going to happen. They should be constantly on the lookout for candidates and actively pursuing them. Even if they don't have a job open, they should be building a pipeline of talent. Second, they should eliminate any inefficiencies and redundancies in their hiring process, because time is of the essence. Everything should be streamlined, and every person involved in the process should be working with a sense of urgency, because spending too much time in the process is going to kill their efforts. And unfortunately, employers do make mistakes in the hiring process, and I'm going to identify and discuss 5 main mistakes that employers make and then how they can prevent them. So the first mistake is treating all candidates the same. There are what we call passive candidates, and there are active candidates. The best candidates in any marketplace are those that are passive candidates. That means they are gainfully employed, they're highly regarded by their current employer, and they're not looking for another job. So veterinary employers might not even know who they are, and that goes back to being proactive versus reactive. Employers must proactively seek out talent, which is usually represented by passive candidates who are already employed and they're not looking for a job. With a 0.5% unemployment in the veterinary profession, you can bet that all of the top candidates in the industry are gainfully employed. And I'm talking about the top 5 to 10% of talent. And since they're employed, veterinary employers must seek them out. The second mistake is writing a job description or a job post that is either inaccurate, uninspiring, or both. You can't just roll out the same job description or the same job post time after time. Are your hiring managers vetting the job description? Have they reviewed it carefully? Is it accurate? Does the description contain just a list of duties, or does it cast a vision for both the position and the person's role within the organization? So the job description should have sizzle. In other words, is it exciting? In other words, why would somebody want the job? You can't expect that somebody's going to want the job just because it's a job and it's there. Because if somebody's employed, they're not going to make a job change just to make a job change. They're only going to go to something that's a better opportunity. The third mistake is not preparing interviewers with the proper training. Everybody involved in the interview process should be prepared, and they should be knowledgeable about all aspects of the position and the responsibilities. And second, they should know how to conduct an interview, including what questions to ask and how to handle questions from the candidate. Because these individuals are representing the company, and they're also branding the company, and employer branding is a huge factor in hiring these days. We've seen plenty of candidates in our search firm that decided to back out of an interview process because of what they saw when they went to an interview. You know, sometimes it's feedback that the people were not expecting them, or they didn't know what to do next, or they didn't feel like the people there were engaged, or that they were too busy to pay attention to them. The fourth mistake is holding out for the perfect candidate. It's understandable that employers want to hire the best candidate. However, there's a danger in always wanting to see just one more candidate. At a certain point, hiring a great candidate is less than hiring a great candidate is less about searching for that candidate for an extended amount of time and more about strategically attracting and engaging the right person. The fifth mistake is the most common mistake that I see in my search practice, and that's lowballing candidates on the job offer. And there are two parts to this mistake. The first part deals with lowballing the salary offer itself. And just because a candidate has a minimum salary requirement doesn't mean that the company should offer that bare minimum. You can't have a get the most value for the minimum cost mindset. It's not like shopping for electronics. If a candidate is worth a certain offer, then the organization should make that offer. And basing the offer on what the person is currently making is also another way of lowballing them. And we just saw an employer that made us an offer for less than the person was making right now. And this was somebody that was gainfully employed in a position, and the employer said, well, we offer a great opportunity, we're a great practice. That does not work in this environment. People do not take jobs for less money than what they're making right now. And the second part of this mistake deals with perks and benefits, because employers are underestimating the importance of perks and benefits, but they are very important to talent. And employers should make them as attractive as possible. And when a company makes an offer, it can include all of the following: things like medical insurance, 401k, dental, paid time off, and continuing education. And 2 weeks of paid time off is not cutting it anymore. We have candidates that are expecting 3 weeks at a bare minimum. We have candidates that say, I'm not going to take a job unless it's 4 or 5 weeks of vacation, but we're still seeing a lot of veterinary practices offering 2 weeks of paid vacation. So since we're talking about the hiring process and the importance of not lowballing candidates, employers should not wait too long to make the offer. They should have the attitude to strike while the iron is hot. Because if it's a high-quality candidate, then chances are that they're interviewing with multiple companies. We have veterinarians that are interviewing with 5, 6, 7, and 8 employers at a time. So they can receive an offer from a competitor at any time. We've had clients that have had to adjust their hiring process. In the past, we would send a candidate, and it might take a week or two for them to get back to us. But now they've had to adjust where if we send a candidate, their policy is that they will interview them, or at least schedule an interview within 24 hours. And when the veterinarian shows up for the interview, they will make a decision on the spot. And if they want to hire that person, they will leave with a job offer. We had a client that said they had an urgent need, and we sent them a veterinarian, and the client went on vacation for 2 weeks, and they came back, they said, we want to schedule an interview with this person. The person already had an offer that they had accepted. Also, it's important for candidates to feel wanted during the process. If an organization has made them feel wanted all the way up to the offer stage, they should make them feel wanted at the offer stage and make a compelling offer and let them know how much that you want them to join their team. Because if the employer drops the ball, like I said, a competitor will swoop up and get them, or they might stay and take a counter offer with their current employer. So to emphasize the need for speed during the hiring process, I have a few more statistics. My company did a study, and we asked candidates, what is the longest amount of time that you would spend in an interview and hiring process? About 13% said that they would spend 3 weeks in the process. 15.7 said that they would spend 4 weeks, and 29% said they would drop out within 4 weeks. So that's almost 30% said they would not spend more than 4 weeks in a process. So if an employer has an open position, then they need to fill that position quickly, because the longer the candidates are in the process, they're going to drop out, and that's why the lack of speed kills in the veterinary profession. So what we're essentially looking at is a classical case of supply and demand. On the supply side, we have plenty of job openings, and on the demand side, there is a high demand for candidates, but there's a shortage of these candidates. And obviously, this is very good right now for veterinarians. It's a great time for them that are seeking new opportunities to better their situation and get more in terms of compensation and benefits, but it's a much more challenging situation for employers, including practice owners. So veterinary employers need to engage candidates during the whole process from start to finish, and they achieve this by setting expectations and following up through every stage of the process. And then second, when they decide on their candidate of choice, they need to make a compelling offer of employment and do so in a timely manner, because if veterinary practices are not doing these things, they simply will not hire the best candidates, and then their competition will.